I want to now recording. Well, that was intense. Okay, so kind of want to get started with brief opening statements, kind of introduce who we are, what we do. I'm Tart. I just kind of hang out on here and do lots of different debates. I'm an atheist, so I'll be taking the atheistic perspective today. The question is which one is going to be more intellectually preferable, atheism or Christianity? I'll be taking like I said, the role of an atheist. There are a number of reasons why I think that. Let's kind of get started with some of those reasons, and then I'll pass it off to Jacob and let him introduce himself and give his reasons as well. So I think that the intellectual preferability is going to reduce to something like uh, intellectual virtues. So, as an example, parsimony is going to be one of them. So not multiplying agents beyond necessity. Other things are going to include like intellectual honesty, being honest about what we do know and what we don't know. And I think there are a number of reasons to believe that Christianity is actually false. So now those would not be like starting assumptions; those would be more like conclusions that I've come to. Arguments, as an example, divine hiddenness arguments, problem of evil arguments, are reasonable to believe that Christianity is just false. And under an atheistic view, I think we have the capacity to account for anything that you can account for from a Christian perspective and any other religious perspective as well. I don't think there's something unique that God adds to the in any way substantially, change the conditions to where we should be a Christian. And that's my reasons. I'll leave it off to Jacob. Jacob, introduce yourself and tell us your position.
Okay, thank you. And I am Jacob. I am basically from India, so please bear with my accent. And I sometimes find difficult to listen to others' accents, so please bear with me and thanks. And so I am basically a Christian, and I am here to defend the topic. Is atheism or Christianity a more intellectually preferable position? And my position is, if atheism is true, that means if God exists. I mean, if basically atheism is true, then there won't be any objective standard for intellectual preference in the first place. So that's basically my position. And so, yeah, I'm ready to start whenever it's ready.
Okay. Well, let's I guess get started. You think that there's without Christianity being true, there are no intellectual standards. What would be your proof of something like that? Like, why would we think something like that's true?
Well, I didn't say if without Christianity. I said without God. I mean, if atheism is true, then there won't be any objective standard for intellectual preference, because that would become subjective to people's disagreements. So I'm saying if atheism is true, not I did not say that if Christianity is true. So
Okay. So, like, is there like a specific argument that you prefer? What's the entailment from like atheism being true to there not being any sort of standards?
oh, because if atheism is true, then there is no one to deny what I just said. I mean, there is no authority to deny the proposition that I made, that there is no objective standard. I mean, whatever you say, I can argue the opposite of it, and there is no authority beyond you and me. So one can't claim that the other is wrong in any better way than the other claims that he is wrong. So in that sense, both would be subjective. Yeah.
So the way that I conceive of like objectivity and subjectivity, and maybe you're using the terms differently than me. Like, so when I think of like objectivity, what I mean is that the truth maker for some given proposition is not going to be some sort of an agent's attitudes, desires, will, or something along those lines. Like, there's not going to be some authority that would be commanding it that would make it subjective. Because what I mean when I say subjective is going to be something about the agent is a truth maker. So it's what the agent's will, desires, attitudes, something along that lines is what's going to be making something the case under a subjective view. So, say for instance, there's a God and his authority is the thing commanding like something about morality or something like that. This would be, at least in the classical sense, this would stand closer to a subjectivist view than an objectivist view. I actually kind of take the reverse of your position in a sense, because I think that the only way that you can have an objective standard things is going to be under an atheistic view, because under the Christian view, absolutely dependent on the attitudes or the desires or will of God. And so there's nothing that's going to be independent of that. So from that point of view, it's close to subjectivity. But let's get your definition. How are you defining objective and how are you defining subjective here?
Okay, so well, when I say objective, I meant to say objective in one's understanding, not about the existence of objectivity, regardless of or understanding. Like for example, if you understand that objective truth exists, then that means you must have taken at least one small amount of, one small piece of dogmatic standard. So, and that's that can't be grounded in to the premises of atheistic worldview. So that's how objectivity can't be grounded in atheism. But you're saying that in case of Christianity, everything is defined by God, and therefore it doesn't. So if I mean, in case of Christianity, yes, as you said, because God says that that actually establishes objectivity, because if what God says becomes objective, regardless of what people would say. So I think in Christianity, it objectivity actually has ground, while in atheism there is no ground. And I think you have not shown any justification. What you just said is that Christianity, in Christianity there is a God who defines everything. So and therefore Christianity doesn't have objectivity. But I think that's the actual reason why Christianity can have objectivity while atheism can't have objectivity. If there is no dogmatic standard, then one's opinion can't be uh, understood to be more valid than another person's opinion if atheism were true. So I think that's the exact same reason what makes objectivity established in Christianity and not in atheism, I guess.
So what does it mean for something to be objective? Like the definition I gave you, presumably if you're using the classical sense, objectivity is mind independence, subjectivity is mind dependence. Now I use it a little differently. I talk about like truth makers. So I think that when I say that a proposition is objectively true, what I mean is that it's not the truth value of that proposition is not going to be dependent on something about my attitudes or an agent's attitudes or anyone's attitudes, desires, will, or anything along those lines. That's going to be that accounts for that proposition being true. So when you say objective, what does
Well, when I say objective, I mean uh, something being objective in your understanding or in my understanding or in some person's understanding. I mean, I agree with what you said, like it's mind independent, which means like even if even if a person disagrees with it, that doesn't necessarily mean I mean, that doesn't make it false, something like that. But I am talking about objectivity in one's understanding. So, when you say that objectivity exists in atheism, my question would be, how do you know that objectivity exists?
so from my view, the only way that objectivity can exist is under an atheistic view, because under the theistic view, everything would be dependent upon the mind of God, right? So objectivity is when the truth maker is not some mind, right? So when I say like the TV is on my wall, the TV is on my wall is not true in virtue of some desire, will, attitude, or something from some sort of agent, right? So God is an agent. God has a mind. Everything is dependent on the mind of God. Um, Subjectivity, as I've defined, is when the truth maker for a proposition is like some kind of a mind. God is the truth maker for all those propositions, and therefore, under your view, everything would be subjective from the way that I'm using the term. So presumably, you're using the word subjective and objective differently than me. So if you're using the word, if it's true, like what you said, you said you're using objectivity in the sense of like mind independence. How exactly is anything independent of the mind of God? And if so, what is independent of the mind of God?
Oh, when I said mind independent, I didn't mean God. I meant humans. I mean, it's not dependent on the mind of humans, but it could be dependent on the mind of God or the plans of God. I'm not denying that, but I'm talking about the mind independence of humans. And coming back to the statement that you said that you can see a TVS on your home. So, and you said that that objectively exists. But why do you think so? I mean, you could just simply be living in a simulation, in which case that perception is just to you. I mean, another person could be having a different set of perceptions, and that person wouldn't be seeing the TVS that you're seeing. So that is a possibility. Why do you think that that possibility doesn't exist? I mean, because objectivity depends on whether you're living in a simulation or not, right?
Yeah, just well, one, I think that that's just false. So I don't think that objectivity is going to depend on whether or not I'm living in a simulation. And two, this is kind of like a sort of catch-all, sort of what's the word? But skeptical challenge to everyone, right? But one, skeptical challenges are going to be symmetrical with any given position. So that skeptical challenge isn't resolved under a theistic view, right? If anything, I think that if we did live in in some kind of a simulation, we might think, well, okay, wait a second, there's a maker of that simulation. If what I mean by God is a the maker of that simulation, then there's this type of a God, I guess, is the way to think of it. So it seems like that would be closer to a skeptical challenge for your position than for mine. Now, I don't think that skeptical challenges are reason giving to think we don't know something. So I'm going to disagree with like Cartesian skepticism, where a Cartesian skeptic would say, if you don't know that you're not in a simulation, then you don't know that you have two hands. And I just disagree. I'm like, well, no, I think that we can have fallible knowledge. There's no need for like certainty on any kind of proposition. Like I don't need to have it to be impossible that this is the case for me to know that it's not the case. Um, I'm not really sure how that relates to like the notion of objectivity and subjectivity, because I think that you can have objectivity even within like a simulation theory. You could still have a notion of objectivity so long as the thing making it true isn't a mind. It would still be objective, right? The idea of objectivity is that it's going to be something about mind independence in the classical sense. I use it a little differently. You're welcome to use either term. The way that I use objectivity is about the truth of the proposition. Now, you said something about God being, not our minds. If a cow were the truth maker for all of these, um, if a cow was the mind making all of these things true, would you, because it's not a human mind, would you call that objective?
Well, I will answer your question. Let me address the things that you have said. I think you misunderstood what I said. I'm not saying that objectivity doesn't exist. I'm just asking, how do you know that objectivity exists? Like, for example, in your atheistic worldview, you're saying that I just you just disagree with skepticism. But well, another person, like let us say a flat earther, would disagree with you, and how do you know that your disagreement is any more valid than a flat earth disagreement? And if both disagreements are equally valid, then that would make it subjective. So basically, I'm not asking about whether objectivity exists or not. I mean, like even in a simulation, there are some things about there are some objective things like the existence of simulation, etc. But my point is not about the existence of objectivity. My point is about the existence of objectivity in your understanding. If you're in a simulation, then all of your understanding is not what, if at all, objectivity exists. It's not the same objectivity that you have in your understanding or anyone has in his or her own assimilation. So so that's the difference that I was that's the point that I was trying to make. So, and another thing is that you asked about what about if cow I mean, all things came from a cow. So I don't know if it's a semantic argument that you're trying to make, but whoever it is that had put uh, the moral conscience in my mind, from which I derive both the objective morality and objective truth in my belief, in my understanding. Whoever gave it to me, it doesn't matter whether it's called cow or God or whatever it is, but whatever gave to me the moral conscience, uh, that is what I'm calling a god. You can call it cow, there's no problem, but as long as you're referring to the same entity, I think it should be fine.
I think you misunderstood my question. So your definition, the way that you said objectivity worked, was if it's independent of human minds. And I said, okay, well, what about a cow's mind? If it's a cow's mind, that is the thing making it like moral propositions true or something like that. Would you hold that that is objective? Presumably, the answer should be no. And so I'm not what I'm getting at is that there's nothing about God's mind that would allow God to be like his position on things to be like objective. They would be subjective specifically to him. He's a mind, and so if it's going to be mind dependent and it's dependent on the mind of God, then that fits the definition of subjectivity. And I'm trying to kind of nail down, when you say objective, what does that mean? Because you said independent of our minds. Sure, okay. Well, what about a cow? Could a cow's mind make something objective?
Okay, so I don't know what kind of moral conscience God has given to cow, and what kind of level of understanding that God has given to cow. If it's the same conscience that a human has, then of course that would also include. But I don't know what kind of a conscience God has given to cow. So I don't know whether cow comes into picture or not. But I don't think it's much relevant, because we're talking about humans, and as long as the things that we are arguing are made in terms of humans, I think that should be sufficient, I guess. And when you're saying about objectivity, I clearly mentioned that my argument was not about the existence of objectivity. My argument about your knowledge on the existence of objectivity. So I think you're making arguments on whether the existence of on the existence of objectivity, but my questions and my points are on your knowledge on the existence of objectivity. I'm simply asking how you know that objectivity exists. So I think that's where we two differ in definition of objectivity, or at least for the case of this argument, I guess.
Well, no, I think I'm not sure if maybe you're sort of switching things a little bit there, because as I understood what you said was that you thought that basically from my position, objectivity couldn't be a thing. Not just that I couldn't know it, but that it just wasn't a thing. Right? That was the initial contention. So it's kind of a little bit of a shift of the goalpost to something else, where it's like, oh well, even if there is objectivity, you couldn't know it. Now, my challenge is that when I say objective, I'm just going to use the classical sense here because that's the most common usage. Mind independence. I ask specifically, what, if anything, is independent of the mind of God from a Christian perspective? And if nothing is, then it just follows trivially that everything is subjective, which was the position I said was true. So, what, if anything, is independent of the mind of God?
Okay, so I will answer your question. First, let me address your first point. Well, you're saying about goal shifting or something like that. I think maybe if what I said is not clear to you, maybe my point is that uh, if atheism is true, then the question of intellectual preference would being objective wouldn't be conceived by a human mind, like in your mind. If you believe that atheism is true, then you can't coherently conceive that intellectually preferable position exists in an objective manner. So my point is basically about how you know that an an intellectually preferable position exists. It's not about whether that position exists outside of your view or not. If something exists and if you can't access it, then what's the point of it? It would be simply irrelevant, I guess. So my point is that you can't know, or even I can't know, if atheism were true, then neither you nor I could know anything that is uh, objectively objectively intellectually preferable. So that was my point. And another question that you asked is, but if God, I mean, if everything is dependent on the mind of God, um well, I don't know what you mean by mind of God. If you're, I mean, if you're saying that that's the same as humans, I don't know. So if that's what your definition is, if you're calling mind of God and mind of human to be equivalent or homeomorphic or stuff like that, then I don't know. I'm not using that definition. I mean, when I said that it's objective, God is putting some conscience in humans by which humans happen to believe that something is objective. So the that is what makes the notion of what we believe to be objective. So obviously it depends on God, but it doesn't depend on the subjective my preference of humans. So that is what I mean by objective, and that's what Christians believe to be objective. So if you're saying that the dependence of truth in God's mind makes it subjective, by that definition it might be subjective, but that's not what Christians define to be objective. So I think that would be a semantic difference rather than a logical difference, I guess.
Yeah, what I'm asking though is I've asked several times for like a definition for objectivity. If you're using mind independent, then in principle, God cannot account for any sort of mind independence because everything that exists, all propositions being true, would be dependent on the mind of God. That's the point that I'm hammering down here. Now, if you grant that, at least in that classical sense, nothing is going to be independent of the mind of God, then I'm not sure what kind of objectivity God provides, because it seems like, as far as I can tell, if everything's going to be dependent on the mind of God and it's the will of God making every given thing true, everything is going to be subjective. You just have this one special subject that you point to, right? Like there's just this one special friend of yours that is the one that's telling you what's right and wrong, what you should and shouldn't believe, those sorts of things. Is that your position?
Oh no, that's not my question. I mean, I think I'm not sure if you got it, you got me or not. I clearly said that when I said objectivity, I'm talking about objectivity. I mean, mind independence of humans, not God. So I made it clear. So if you have any questions on that, you can ask me. But I think I made my point clear that I'm talking about the mind independence of humans.
I'm not sure if you
That is
understood
my
my
definition.
objection to this. So I said, well, what if it's a cow's mind that's making everything true, right? Like, so there's this cow, it's out in my pasture, and it's the thing that's telling me what's morally right and morally wrong based on its moos. Would that account for objectivity? And if not, then your definition of mind independent of humans is not going to be sufficient to capture objectivity. So I'm trying to understand what is objective here, because it's like it's definitely not. If it's just independent of human minds, then a cow's mind should suffice. We could use aliens' minds. Maybe there's this really really powerful alien out there that's telling us what to do. Would that be objective or subjective? Or why would it have to? Why would? And I don't even know what the difference and why it would be relevant, whether it's a human mind or God's mind. Like, why would that be relevant for objectivity? Because objectivity is just independent of a subject's agents or their attitudes or something like that. Like, that's just what objectivity means. So what's your specific definition? Because it can't just be independent of human minds, right? It's got to be something more than that.
I think I made it clear to you that I don't know what you mean by a cow's mind. I mean, is it the same as human's mind? Is that how you're defining cow's mind? I mean, what exactly is cow's mind when you say about cow's mind? I mean, what exactly is it? Is it the same as human's mind?
No, I don't think a cow's mind is a human's mind. No.
Well, then it doesn't apply. It doesn't apply. I mean, when I said objectivity, I'm talking about mind independence of humans. And when I said the statement that if atheism were true, then we won't be having objective intellectual preference. I'm talking about humans. So why does cow come into picture in the first place? So I don't think cow's mind is much relevant. I'm talking about humans' mind independence. So that is my definition. I think I'm very clear about that.
Yeah, I'm pointing out that your definition can't suffice. So if I say, for instance, let's say I say, okay, well, where I get my objective standards is from this super intelligent alien race. They've come to Earth. They tell me what to do, what I ought to do, what I should do. They give me commands of one kind or another. Now, these aren't human minds. These are alien minds. If your definition of objectivity is something that is independent of human minds, then is this going to be objective by your standard? If I'm following the decrees of an alien race, is this objective? If no, then your definition doesn't suffice.
When you said alien mind, are you saying that whatever you're calling, let's say you're calling alien mind, someone might call it X or some other person might call it Y. So you're calling it alien mind. Are you saying that that alien mind is what gave you the moral conscience from which you derive objectivity? Is that what you're referring to?
Let's say in the hypothetical, sure, why not? They manipulated our genes and our understanding of things over the centuries to produce what we think of as morality. So what is this objective morality at that point, or objective anything at that point?
Let's stick on that point. When you said that it's possible, well, I'm calling that exactly what you're calling alien mind. I'm calling God. I mean, I think it seems to be a semantic argument here, because you're referring to the same person who gave the moral concept that I am also referring to. So it doesn't matter whether you call it alien's mind or cow's mind or God, as long as you're referring to the same person. I think I made it clear earlier also. So is if that's the only argument that you're making, that I think that's basically a semantic argument rather than a logical argument.
Well, no, so you need to follow the definition that you're giving. So if I say something is independent of human minds, and I find another being that possesses a mind, right? If my definition is objectivity is independent of human minds, I have this other mind that's not a human that I'm basing my beliefs or whatever on. Is that objective? The answer is, I'm just going to give you the answer because I don't know why you're not following this. The answer is no. No, it's not objective, right? It's still going to be dependent on a mind, the mind of that other being, right? So when I say mind independent and you say mind independent, you're not really saying anything substantive. You're just saying there's this mind that I like. Here's this other one that I like, the one that I point to. And I call that objective because it's independent of my mind. So if, say, for instance, I picked out who's in the audience, I've got Lance here. Let's say Lance is someone that I want to worship, and I want to devote everything to his will. Now, it wouldn't be objective just because it's not my mind or not all the other human minds. And let's say Lance is an alien. If I'm like, oh, you know what, I'm going to do whatever Lance tells me because Lance is my objective standard. Well, Lance has a mind. He has a subjectivity. And if his mind is the thing making any moral proposition or any other given proposition, or his will is the thing making that true, that's going to fit the definition of subjectivity, not objectivity. Like this is, it's a pretty straightforward point, and I'm not sure why you're not understanding that God, in principle, can't account for an objective notion of anything. It would all be subjective under this view, and that's my objection. Is that okay? So I think that the only way you can account for objectivity of these things is going to be under an atheistic view because it requires, as a prerequisite, that the truth maker not be a mind. But under the Christian view, the truth maker for everything, absolutely everything, is the mind of God. So it can't be mind independent unless there's something independent of God's mind. So I've asked, is there anything independent of the mind of God? If so, what? If not, do you agree that this entails a subjective notion under the mind independent, just the classical sense of subjectivity?
I think you have been conflating with mind independence and mind exclusivity. Like, just because I said mind independence, I actually meant it to be a property of objectivity, not the definition, the exact, the deterministic definition of objectivity. Just because I said that it's mind independent, I don't mean that if anything that exists that that is excluded from that's not having any relation with humans, that would be mind independent. That's not what I meant to say. What I meant to say is that the truth value of something being mind independent but understood by every mind in humans, or being able to be understood by every human mind, that is what I'm talking about objectivity, not something that excludes all humans. When you're saying that an alien I mean, exists with his mind or her mind, you're talking about exclusivity. I'm not talking about exclusivity. I'm talking about something, the truth value of it being true, uh, to be mind independent in the sense that it doesn't depend on human preference, but that doesn't mean that I mean, anything that exists outside of all human minds is something referred to as mind independent. That's not what I'm saying. So when I said there is, I mean, when I said about objectivity, I'm talking about something that uh, is supposed to be true even if a human disagrees with it. That is what I meant by mind independence. Or if my definition, earlier definition, was not obscure, this is what I meant when I said mind independent. I'm not talking about something that excludes human minds. I'm talking about something that is supposed to be true in human minds even if an individual disagrees. So that is what I meant to say by objectivity in minds. And it doesn't matter whether a non-human especially who gave to humans the moral conscience uh, is a different mind. So yeah, that's my point. So I don't think what the questions you asked would apply here, because basically my definition much different from what you're saying, I guess.
Well, so I'm not sure if you're understanding the objection. So the objection goes like this. You say objectivity is when something is made true by something that's independent of human minds, not just independent of minds, but human minds. And this alien race has, in the shadows, it has, built our genes. It's built us up to who we are. We just weren't aware of it this whole time. And now I worship this alien race. And this alien race is the thing that tells me what's good and bad and what I should and shouldn't do. From your perspective, this would be an objective account, right? Because it wouldn't be a human mind making it true. That fits the definition you gave. There's not a human mind making it true. It's an alien mind making it true. I follow the alien. That alien is just a hyper advanced species or something. They're just they live on another planet. But I follow their whims, right? This would be an objective account. Now there wouldn't need to be God under this account, but your initial contention was that without God, you can't have objectivity. But under the definition you gave, you absolutely can have objectivity because there just needs minds that aren't humans that are making it true. Right? So if it's just any old mind that happens potentially is not human, and that mind is the thing making it true, that I ought, believe follow evidence to its conclusion or something like that. Say, for instance, it's an alien, then you would have to grant under your view that it's not the case that a god is required. Like it's just like this just follows from your position that it's false that you can't have an account of objectivity under atheism. Like if your definition is the correct one and that's what you mean, then it's just false that under atheism you couldn't have this. Now I don't even hold to the position, right? Like I don't even hold to that it like requires an alien or anything like that. I think because I use objectivity in a little bit stronger of a sense than you, I think anything's gonna be like anything about God's just gonna be subjective. It just fits the definition of classical subjectivism. It fits very nicely with it. Everything's dependent on the mind of God. Everything's gonna be subjective, and there's just nothing I can do about that. And under that view, now under an atheistic view, there would be other things making things true. Like for instance, the TV that is on my wall that is being made true by this object called a TV, and it being in this location such that it's on my wall. So that proposition the TV is on my wall is made true by something that's not going to be dependent on my mind, your mind, or anyone's mind that I can think of in that instance, including God. Like I don't think there's a God that's making that true, and so that's going to be like an objective account for something like this. Now, like I said at the beginning, I use a little bit different language around objectivity and subjectivity than the classical sense usually. And the reason I do is because I'm a transcendental idealist, so my view of objectivity and subjectivity I expressed very early on in the debate, but I don't want to confuse things. But the point that I'm making here is that if there's a God, then everything is subjective under the definition I'm using. Now, if we use the definition you're using, it just follows that you're in this issue where there can be objectivity under an atheistic perspective. It's just going to require some other, like some alien or something like that, or maybe I could worship a cow or a bird or a bear. I don't know. Just has to be a non-human mind that I'm basing things on, and that just seems like a silly definition.
Okay, so I would like to ask you some questions. Can you quickly answer without going through a long speech? I mean, can you quickly answer a few questions that I would like to ask?
Yeah, as long as there's not like a lot of nuance to it, sure.
Okay, so when you said that a TV exists, a flat earther could say that a TV doesn't exist there. So how do you know that your truth is objective and the flat earther's claim is wrong?
Can you
If
can
there's
you
an
ask the question again? You were kind of cutting out for me for a second. You said if something exists, and I couldn't hear what you were saying.
Oh, I'm sorry. What I'm saying is that if you're saying that your TV exists, you're saying that TV objectively exists. I'm asking you if a flat earther comes and says that that TV isn't existing there at that point. Um, I mean, how is your claim that it objectively exists any more than the flat earthers claim that the TV doesn't exist?
Did you say a platypus?
Yeah, no, a flat earther, a person who believes in flat earth.
Oh, a flat earther. If a flat earther says that my TV doesn't exist, how do I know that it does?
Yeah.
It's going to be just based on like some kind of an intuitive case, right? So like I'm seeing a TV. It seems to be on my wall. I'm going to base my beliefs on seemings. Now, if they have some kind of a defeater for my position, let's say, for instance, they can provide me reasons why there's not, in fact, not a TV on my wall, and what I'm actually looking at is a painting that just happens to be in the shape of a TV, and my eyesight sucks. Then the seemings are defeated, right? Like I was like, okay, well, I have bad eyesight. It's actually just a TV. It's a picture frame that's hanging on the wall and just happens to look like a TV. Sure, if they can provide a defeater, but otherwise, I'm just going to base my I'm just going to base my beliefs on the seemings. I don't see a reason to go any deeper than that.
So, suppose if you were living in a simulation and that flat earther was also living in a different simulation or perhaps the same simulation as well. It is possible that the simulator is giving to you a perception pertaining to the existence of the TV, while giving another set of perceptions to the flat earthers, to the flat earther, pertaining to the TV not existing. If that is a possibility, and with that possibility, it is possible that both your claims are equally valid, right? I mean, your claim and the flat earthers claim.
I don't think there's anything that's like equally valid. Like validity is a thing for argument, like argumentation. Validity is just whether or not the conclusion follows from the premises, and like it has a valid form. Is what you're referring to when you talk about validity. But if you're saying something like you're offering some kind of like a Cartesian skeptical scenario where I've got this person, he's in some kind of a separate simulation, and I'm in one simulation. I'm not entirely sure how we're even communicating if we're not in the same, like, I guess, location. I don't know how this is happening. If you're asking how do I know that that's not the case, well, one, I don't think that Cartesian skeptical scenarios are reason giving to doubt my knowledge. Like I think that you need to actually offer a defeater for my position, not just like a skeptical challenge. So like the difference between a defeater and a skeptical challenge is going to be something like, if I have an intuition that the Earth is flat, I look out and I see that the Earth is flat around me. It seems as though the Earth is flat, but then I can provide you substantive evidence, like say for instance photographs of the Earth to show you that it is in fact not flat. That would be an actual defeater. But but somebody saying, well, what if the Earth isn't flat? What if it's a cube? What if it's a really big ball? These are just skeptical challenges, right? These wouldn't be defeaters. A defeater would be, here's the evidence, here's a picture of the Earth, look at it, it's just not flat. Like that would be a defeater. So skeptical challenges I don't take to be like reason giving to doubt our beliefs. I just think that they're not substantive. Um, that you need something stronger to doubt the seemings. So all I'm saying is that it's just not. He's not giving me a reason to believe that there's not a TV on my wall.
Okay, I think you missed the whole point. I'm talking about the possibility of you living in a simulation. When you said that the Earth is flat, here we have evidence, or here we can observe that it's not flat. You're basically presupposing that you're living in an objective reality, which is the same point in question right now. I mean, I'm talking about the possibility of a simulation, which gives one set of perceptions to you and another set of perceptions to the flat earther. I'm talking about that possibility. So you can't say that you see that is not flat, because to you it appears to be round, but to the flat earth it appears to be flat. And I'm talking about that possibility. So in that possibility, all of what you said doesn't are not relevant, because I'm talking about that possibility in which two people have different. And if you don't have an answer for Cartesian skepticism or something like that, that's fine. The point that I'm trying to make is that obviously you can't have an answer unless you take at least one small piece of information as a dogmatic standard by which you judge the flat earther that it is wrong. The moment you say that, see here, the earth, you look at it and it is clearly round and not flat, you are taking the belief that you're not living in a simulation as a dogmatic standard by which you're judging the flat earth. So that is what atheism can't ground, and therefore that's why everything becomes subjective. You're talking about the mind independence of humans, right? Here there is a mind dependence of what you believe to be the shape of Earth and what the flat Earth believes to be the shape of Earth. So in this possibility, if we follow atheism, that would break down to subjectivity. So that's my point. But in case of Christianity, we can have a dogmatic standard by which I can believe that the the simulation theory is not true, by which I can judge a flat earther that he is wrong, or an anti-vaxxer that he is wrong. But in atheism, you can't do that, because there is no dogmatic standard. There are no dogmatic standards. Everything is equally dogmatic and could be contradictory, which makes them subjective, not objective. So that is why atheism can't ground objectivity, even by your own definition. So yeah.
So you said a number of things wrong. One, I did give a response to Cartesian skepticism. Specifically, I gave it's called the phenomenal conservativist response. So phenomenal conservatism is the idea that we all base things on the way in which it seems, and then in order to defeat those seemings, so those intuitive sort of like reflections, you're going to need some kind of a defeater for them. That is a specifically that's a very modern, very new. It's very new in the literature as a response to Cartesian skepticism. So I did respond to Cartesian skepticism, but let's pretend for a second that you are a Cartesian, that you actually hold, in fact, that it's the case that if you, for instance, don't know that there's not this evil demon controlling you, then you don't know that then you don't know that God is all good or something like that. So how do you demonstrate to me, Jacob? How do you attack Descartes' demon for a second? Like, how do you know that for instance, let's say I posit this demon has written the Bible. He's tricked you into believing that he is this deity, and this deity has one goal, and that's to trick you. He likes tricking you, and so he's just tricking you about everything. The Bible was written by him. You were born 5 minutes ago, but he's filled in your entire life with lots and lots of memories and beliefs. How is it that you handle this skeptical scenario? I've given you my answer to Cartesian scenarios. I don't think the mere possibility of something like this is reason giving to actually believe it. I think that it just doesn't give us reason to doubt our intuitions, but that's phenomenal conservatism. So how does Christianity respond to this? How do you know that there's not an evil demon tricking you?
Oh, okay. So Christianity takes by faith that the value of moral conscience is real. So whoever gives it, whether you call it semantically God or devil or whatever it is, Christianity takes that moral conscience of childhood by faith, the value of it by faith. So uh, it doesn't matter whether it is false. If it is false, then the person who takes it by faith would be believing a false thing. But uh, that if that were true, then there wouldn't be any truth in the first place. So basically, the position of Christianity is that if truth exists, then Christianity is true. So if objective truth exists, then your Cartesian demon actually is not true. I mean, if objective truth exists in one's understanding, then your Cartesian demon doesn't make sense, because that's a presupposition that restricts this Cartesian demon. And therefore, since Christianity takes this premise as a dogmatic standard by faith, Christianity defines the value of moral conscience to be the value from God, or if you want to if you want to semantically call it devil, is fine. But the ultimately the belief is that that value is real. And you are asking what if it's false? I mean, what if it is the case, there is a possibility that it could be false. Yes, there is a possibility that it could be false, just like there is a possibility that simulation could be true, in which case objective reality doesn't exist. So the Christianity position is not that simply that I mean, Christians' argument is not simply that Christianity is true. It is basically that if truth exists, then Christianity is true, and they take the value of truth by faith. I mean, they take the value of moral conscience by faith, by which they determine objective truth and objective morality. So the faith is the difference. I mean, in Christianity, faith makes it coherently believable. But in case of atheism, there is no such thing as faith, so there is no objectivity. You can't account for any of these things, I guess. And regarding Cartesian demon, answering to Cartesian demon, I didn't actually get your answer. I didn't get your answer. So if you could repeat it, I would appreciate it. Or if you can give some links to it, I can go through it also. I basically did not get your answer, your address of the Cartesian demon question that I'm talking about. So yeah, this is my answer.
Okay, I'll respond to the totality of that, but first I'll give you, since you missed my response to the Cartesian demon. basically, I'm a phenomenal conservative, so I think that what we do is we base our beliefs on the seemings of things. And when the seemings fail, like say for instance, we offer a defeater, that's when the seemings come in question. But it doesn't make sense for us to think that, for instance, just because it's merely possible that there is this evil demon tricking us all the time, that's any reason to doubt our ability to know things, because we just base things on our seemings, and the demon doesn't count as a defeater. So the only way to defeat a seemings is to offer a defeater, not a mere possibility. So like an actual evidential case against it. That's phenomenal conservatism. It's a very new in literature. But anyway, so let's respond to the rest of it. So I didn't hear a response to like a Cartesian scenario in there. Like if you think that it's at least possible, and you think those are reason given to think that if these things are possible, then I can't know anything or something like that, and you think that's true of atheism, then that would be symmetrical with Christianity, right? Because you granted that it's at least possible that there's this being tricking you, and there's not a way for you to know that there's not this being tricking you. And then from that, you say, oh, well, then nothing is true whatsoever. And it's like, well, okay, sure. So how do you overcome these Cartesian scenarios? Because it seems like that leads to epistemic nihilism, right? So you should be an epistemic nihilist under that view. At least if you're going to be consistent within the view, you're going to be an epistemic nihilist. Now, presumably, you're not an epistemic nihilist, as you believe that you know that God exists and those sorts of things. So it's going to be important to you that you can, in fact, falsify those if you find Cartesian scenarios forceful and reason giving to be an epistemic nihilist. If those reasons, like if me being an atheist, and it's hypothetically, let's say I think Cartesian scenarios actually do give me reason to doubt my knowledge and whatnot. Well, then I should just why would I believe that I have knowledge, right? Descartes' position was like he came down to like the basal sort of I think therefore I am, which a lot of people think he was making an argument for his existence. He disagreed with that at times, and he also agreed with it at times. But basically, Descartes became just shy of an epistemic nihilist for a bit. And so, like, I'm wondering if you think these are forceful. How is it that you are holding your position? If it's just dogmatically, like I'm just going to be a Christian just for the fuck of it, like, but why? Why do you think that Christianity has like the unique capacity as a dogma to give you that kind of objectivity? Like, presumably any view, I could just follow anything dogmatically, and it would give me that same degree of objectivity, right? Because if you're saying, okay, well, it's possible there's this demon, and if that's at least possible, then I can't know that there's that I'm not being tricked by this demon, and so I can't know anything. But if I follow Christianity dogmatically and I just do what the hell it says, then I can have objectivity. But that would be true of any dogma by that virtue, right? Like I could follow Islam, I could follow the spaghetti monster, I could follow anything, and it would be dogmatically the case that I now have objectivity by that metric. So what's unique about Christianity that one allows you to overcome the Cartesian scenarios? Two, if you can't overcome them, how do you know things? And then finally, if you in fact don't know anything unless you just follow a dogma, then how is your dogma uniquely capable of accounting for knowledge in the case that other dogmas can't? Those are my three questions to you.
Okay, so let me answer one by one. Firstly, I don't know if my words were clear or not. I did not say that Cartesian demon skepticism is a possibility. I rather said that it is a possibility if no faith is imported. I mean, if no faith is imported, then yes, it is a possibility. If no dogmatic standard is imported, then yes, that's a possibility. But if a dogmatic standard is imported that contradicts it, then with that knowledge, with that understanding, it is impossible, and that makes you believe in that gives ground for you to believe in objectivity. So it's not about I didn't claim that it is a possibility even when faith is important. So by virtue of faith, it makes it impossible. So so Cartesian demon doesn't apply to me because I import faith. So that is I import a dogmatic standard by faith that contradicts skepticism, I guess. I mean, like Descartes' skepticism, I guess. So that is one thing. And secondly, you said why any dogma? I mean, you said that if I'm taking something in with dogma, why not Islam or why not something else? Well, I'm taking the moral conscience that I have as a dogmatic standard, and that is the same. That is the same standard by which I also interpret objective truth. So I'm basically saying is that the dogmatic standard that is reasonable for my belief in objective truth is the same dogmatic standard that puts me at an obligation to believe that Christianity is true. So, since you're asking why this dogmatic standard and not another dogmatic standard, that is because I have this moral conscience that I can feel in my mind, and by virtue of that, I'm taking that value of that moral conscience by faith, and that is the dogma that I'm taking by faith, and that is by which I interpret everything else. So that is what I describe to be Christianity. If by Islam you're describing the same thing, then that would be identical. But if you're describing something else that contradicts with it, then that is wrong by virtue of my moral conscience. So that is the second question. And thirdly, you're saying like you're addressing of Cartesian skepticism is basically that you believe in things which are seemingly true, or which you're seemingly true, I mean which are seeming to you. That raises the question: are you taking what are seeming to you by faith as a dogmatic standard? That raises that question. So when you say that you take things that are seeming to you, are you taking what is seeming to you as a dogmatic standard by faith? So that's my question. So I mean, I would like to know your answer. Right?
Yes, I mean, no. So it's not going to be like a dogmatic standard. So, like for instance, you can provide to me a defeater for my seemings. So, say for instance, I'm looking out at the world and it looks flat to me. That's true. I can look out my right now, and I'm in a pretty flat area. I don't see any sort of hills or mountains, and it certainly doesn't seem to drop off and go into a circle, right? So my seemings is that it looks flat, and maybe at some point, if I had lived in history and not had other pieces of information, I might have believed that it's flat. But if you can offer me a defeater for my seemings, then I have reason to believe this other thing is true, and therefore the seemings of things are false. So even though from my perspective it looks flat, I've been offered a defeater, namely that we have one, mathematical proofs, we have um, pictures from space, we have a number of things that inform me that it's in fact false that the Earth is flat. So I have a defeater for the seemings. So I need some kind of a defeater for the seemings. Now, the issue with Cartesian skeptical scenarios is that they don't offer any sort of a defeater. They just offer a challenge to the knowledge. So all they're doing is they're just kind of attacking whether or not you can know, and assuming that if you don't know one thing, then you don't know something else that comes from it. So, like for instance, if I don't know that not in a simulation, then I don't know that that I have no, that I don't have two hands, right? And I just deny that first premise. I'm like, well, no, I also kind of take a Morian approach and a little bit of Mills, something like. But I do know I have two hands, so I know I'm not in a simulation. Just Morian shift that. Um, that's one approach. But essentially, no, I'm not taking it on a dogmatic standard. I'm actually saying, hey, look, you can defeat my seemings. You can offer me a defeater, but a skeptical challenge just isn't strong enough to defeat those seemings. And I'm going to follow the seemings before I'll follow the skeptical challenge.
Okay. So basically, the problem with this is that you're saying about defeater, but uh, the based on the hypothetical situation that I'm putting it, which is the simulation, there won't be any defeater except the simulation. So the simulation could give you a different view that the Earth is not flat, or that is flat, but that has nothing to do with another person like flat earther believing in it, because he is believing based on what his simulation is giving to him. So this person can't be any defeater in any sense, because we are talking about the hypothetical possibility of that particular aspect, or that particular situation where one person's one person's reality is different from what you perceive to be reality. I mean, what you perceive to be reality is different from what another person like flat earth perceives to be reality. We are talking about that possibility. So in that possibility, obviously there won't be any defeater, and the question is, are you taking by faith that that possibility does not exist, or that possibility is false or less likely, something like that. So if you take things like that by faith, then obviously, of course, you can believe in objective truth by saying that I take the by faith that simulation is not true or is less likely to be true, by which you can say. But the question is, are you taking those by faith? If you're taking those by faith, then you're basically taking those as dogmatic standards by which you're judging, for example, a flat earther. But that's exactly what atheism doesn't allow you to do it. But you can still do it by violating atheism. But that proves that atheism is not the real, the true worldview. So that is one thing. And secondly, in case of having two hands or something like that, I think I would like to make a key distinction between uh, truths, I mean, or things that are the, within your own feelings and the things that exist beyond your own feelings. Like, for example, um, I mean, as you said, as Descartes said that I doubt, therefore I exist. Obviously, no one can resist it. You always feel that you exist, or I always feel that I exist. I always feel the perceptions that the simulation gives to me. So, in all of these cases, I can't deny the existence of the perceptions that I'm feeling. So those would be absolute truth. There's no way to deny them. They are truth by virtue of the definition that I'm feeling them. But when I'm talking about objective truth, I'm talking about things that are beyond your own feeling, not about how you feel about your hand or something, but what actually exists outside your feelings. Like, for example, as you said, a TV exists, or the shape of Earth is round. Those are what I'm talking about. Because if you're talking about the beliefs that exist within your own feelings, then obviously no one can doubt it. I mean, it's impossible for them to be wrong. So obviously they would always be right if they exist within your own feelings. But the question or the skepticism is about things that exist beyond your own feelings. Like, for example, you can believe that the simulation is giving to you the shape of the earth to be round, and that exists to you. You feel it. Those perceptions are undeniable. So those are those the existence of those perceptions are true. But the question is not about the existence of perceptions. The question is about the cause of those perceptions. Are they the reflection of a spherical object called earth, or are they the reflection of what the simulator is giving to you as the set of perceptions? If the first one is the case, then a flat earther should also, if he uses his abilities properly, should also be able to see the same roundness of the earth. But if the second one were true, I mean, if the second case were true, where you're getting things from simulation, then you can have the round earth perceptions being given to you by the simulation, and the flat earther could equally get a different set of perceptions pertaining to flat earth. So if that were true, then what you believe to be true would be contradicting with what the flat earther believes to be true, and you believe that your truth is more true than the flat earther's truth, and flat earther believes that his truth is more, more valid than your truth. And both would be subjective unless you import at least a small dogmatic standard by which you can judge that the flat earth is wrong. I mean, one way of that dogmatic standard is to follow your moral conscience, but that needs to be there. Like, that dogmatic standard needs to be there. So that is what I'm talking about, that atheism doesn't have. So if you have to believe in objective truth, then you need to take at least a small amount of dogmatic standards, which atheism can't do. Therefore, if those are true, then atheism is not the true worldview. So that is my point.
So you don't think you think that atheists can't be dogmatic? I've met plenty of dogmatic atheists. So yeah, they can definitely be dogmatic and still be atheistic. You can have faith in something and still be atheistic. Like, for instance, you can have faith that your mother's still alive and still be an atheist. Theism and being particularly Christianity is going to be a belief in the Christian God, which is what you're supposed to be defending. But the idea here is that atheists can for sure be dogmatic. So that if dogma is all if your request for objectivity is just dogmatism, and that's what you think can be, that's what accounts for objectivity, then any old dogmatic atheist can be an objectivist by that sort of standard. But and I'm going to take it, since you keep using this this Cartesian scenario. Either A, you're not understanding my response to Cartesian skepticism, because I'm just saying that I don't find that reason giving or forceful, because it's not a defeater for the themings. I don't know if maybe you're not understanding how that's a response, and that would basically say, well, okay, sure, this is possible, but that's just not reason giving for me to believe it. If you have a direct defeater for my seemings, sure, you can offer that, and then I would have reason to believe other than the seemings. But it seems to me, at least, to be the case that I'm not in some kind of a situation where I'm dealing with someone who's in somehow in a parallel universe that's dealing with me. But let's play with that for a second. Let's pretend that we have this Cartesian scenario that we're both going to pretend is somehow forceful, right? Because I don't think it's forceful, but you seem to think it's forceful. So under your view, you have a God, and your God is the thing that's giving you objectivity, and that's the being. Now, if this God told you one thing and told, say, for instance, told Johannes here a different thing, you would both be equally valid in believing those things. Do you agree to that? Would you agree that if God told you one thing and he told him a totally different thing, you're both equally validated, even if they contradict, and both are
Well,
objective?
well, if I know that God told me this, it's impossible for me to know that God told me something else to Johannes or someone else, because I am taking the value of moral conscience by faith, by which I know what God told me. And you're saying that if no faith is imported, then it's possible that God could tell to some other person something else which contradicts with what I believe that God told me. Yes, that is a possibility if no faith is imported. But I import faith by faith that the value of moral conscience is real, by which I cannot believe that the same being contradicted in another person's mind uh, is possible by virtue of my faith. So that faith is what makes it impossible for me to believe that another person like Johannes had a different thing, to a different conscience given by God. And I believe that this Johannes has the same conscience given by God, by which I can judge that Johannes. Just hypothetical case. I'm not believing that Johannes is flat earther, but even if Johannes were a flat earther, I can judge the by virtue of that faith that no, your belief is wrong. Or Johannes can, if I were a flat earther, then Johannes can judge me by importing his faith, that I am actually making a wrong statement by claiming that the earth is flat. So this faith is what makes me impossible to believe that another person has a different conscience given by God, because I take the conscience given by God by faith, which contradicts the exact scenario that you're saying. But you're saying that if faith is not
So wait,
important, then it's a possibility. So yes, that is a possibility. But I am importing faith, by which it makes it impossible, at least in my understanding, I guess.
I have two questions there. The first one's going to be like, why would faith make something impossible? And two, if Johannes has the same faith in the same God, and he says God, and he knows that God in fact told him something that's contradictory to you, how is that? Are both of these contradictory things objectively true? And if so, then I mean, I don't see how this is any sort of like objectivity of any kind, really. But how is it like? What is something? How does faith make something impossible? What does impossible mean? Like, give me a definition of impossible, and then how faith interacts with possibility to exclude that possibility. How does faith do that?
Well, I think I don't know if I made my words clear or not. I'm not saying about the impossibility of the existence. I'm talking about the impossibility of my belief. If I believe that the value of my moral conscience is real, I can't believe. I mean, it is impossible for me to believe at the same time that another person has a different moral conscience. That is what I said to be impossible. Not that in the absence of faith that that such an event could not exist. That's not what I meant to say. I mean, if in the absence of faith, it is quite possible that another person could have a different conscience than I have. But given that I take my conscience by faith, it's impossible for me to simultaneously believe that another person has a different conscience. So that is what I said to be impossible, not the existence of such a conscience in the absence of faith. So That so I think that is the I mean that's what you misunderstood maybe perhaps. So
Okay, then you're
yeah.
just equivocating on two different things. So let's keep it let's keep it like symmetrical with the because the idea that I'm levying here is because you believe that skeptical challenges, skeptical scenarios are forceful, and you seem to think that, as far as I can tell, this simulation sort of idea, where if I'm looking at a TV and someone else is looking at the same TV, and we're disagreeing that that TV exists, and one of them is being fed in his simulation or whatever, that he's in some sort of alternate simulation, and he's not in fact looking at a TV. I'm in my simulation and I'm looking at a TV, and the simulator is just giving us both different information. I'm using your God as an analogous case that is almost identical to the scenario you're giving. So you have a God. He's telling you there's a TV on the wall. He's telling Johannes that there's not a TV on the wall, and you're going, well, how do you adjudicate that? Like, what's the way you're going to adjudicate this between you? Because if apparently, if I'm understanding your scenario correctly, it seems as though you're saying if you can't adjudicate this under these sort of skeptical scenarios, then it just follows that you don't have objectivity. If that's true, how do you adjudicate this with Johannes? Johannes says there's a TV. You say there's not a TV. God is giving you in one way. God is giving you that there is a TV. He's giving Johannes that there's not a TV, or something to that effect. You're both just disagreeing, and it's God telling you two disagreeing things. How do you adjudicate this?
Okay, firstly, you were saying that as if I am claiming that skeptical scenarios are forceful. I mean, I don't know what you mean by that, but I never used that term, like skeptical scenarios are forceful. I don't know what you mean by forceful. So you can clarify that later, I guess. And regarding God being, I mean, like regarding God saying one thing to me and another thing to Johannes, and it being identical, or at least as you claimed to be identical to the case of simulation, where you're getting one simulation and another person is getting another simulation. I think if I made it clear that I am taking this thing by faith, and if through that faith, in my understanding, this would be an impossibility. I'm saying to you, in case of I mean, but you're saying that, oh, even if I take things by faith, that doesn't necessarily mean from an outsider to believe that Johannes, it's impossible for Johannes to actually have a different conscience. Well, yes, I can't know that. Neither can't an atheist know that. But the difference is, I mean, in case of knowing the absolute, neither, I mean, without faith, neither can atheist do nor can Christian do. But in case of uh, knowing things by faith, a Christian can do it, but an atheist can't do it, because an atheist can't ground the objectivity of faith to the premises of an atheistic worldview. And therefore, the moment he begins to believe in objectivity or dogmatic standards, that person is believing in things that exceed what the atheistic worldview would allow him to do. So he's basically violating atheism. I mean, earlier also you said that many atheists are dogmatic. Well, they are basically exceeding the boundary of atheism, because according to atheism there are no objective dogmatic standards. Every dogmatic standard in atheism would be subjective, and one's dogmatic standard would be no more valid than another person's dogmatic standard. Well, in case of religion, it's possible to take dogmatic standards in a different way, but at least it offers a facility for dogmatic standards, whereas atheism doesn't offer. So my answer to you is that if you're talking about knowing absolutes in the absence of faith, well, a Christian can't do it. Well, an atheist also can't do it. But in case of believing things about the impossibility of Johannes being having a different conscience, by taking things by faith, as a Christian, I can coherently do it. Well, as an atheist can't do it coherently with respect to his atheistic worldview. So that is the difference that I'm trying to point out, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I just pointed out how you can't do that coherently, because Johannes could be receiving this revelation from God as well. Like, God's telling him one thing, God's telling you another thing. You don't really have a method of adjudicating it. So if you take the simulation sort of skeptical scenario to be some sort of an issue for knowledge than the same issue for knowledge for your position. Now, I don't take either of these to be issues for knowledge, to be totally blunt. Like I said, I'm a phenomenal conservative, so I take a different route to how I judge things being things being knowledge. Like, I don't think that the mere possibility of something is reason giving to believe it's the case. But she said some things there that are majorly problematic. So let's get started on the big issues. So first off, dogmatism is not the opposite of atheism. Christianity is happenstantially dogmatic, but that doesn't make it the only dogma. There's lots and lots of dogma, including atheistic dogmas. Like, for instance, someone could be dogmatically committed to, to being an atheist. Like, even if they were presented some sort of substantive evidence against against the truth of atheism, they could dogmatically hold to atheism. And so it can't be the case that dogma and atheism are the opposites. And by going beyond that and being a dogmatist, they're not in some way violating atheism. Atheism is just, if you take the classical definition of atheism, it's the belief that there's not a god. If you take the sort of modern New Age definition of atheism, it's just lack of belief that there is a god. These two, neither of these has an issue or any sort of content that includes dogma. So it's just false that an atheist can't be dogmatic. Now, if you think the only solution is dogma, I'm just going to say no. No, it's not. Like, I gave a specific solution to Cartesian skepticism that wasn't dogma, right? You can offer defeaters for intuitions. You can offer defeaters for seemings. And they wouldn't be able to hold that same seeming or that the same sort of case with that defeater in mind. So no, but dogma is not going to be the only alternative. And like I said, atheism is not like immune to dogmatism. So even if someone is dogmatically taking something on faith or belief, that's not the same as believing in God, right? So like the opposite of atheism is going to be like the belief in some kind of a God. And dogma just doesn't entail that. Like, the belief in a god from your perspective does entail being dogmatic, but that doesn't mean that being dogmatic entails believing in a god. So I don't think that's going to be a very powerful sort of position to take. I think you're gonna have some issues there. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that. Like, why would it be the case that to be dogmatic you need to be religious? Why would that be the case? Why would you need to believe in a god?
Okay, so let me answer one by one. Firstly, you're asking like it would. I mean, like if I believe by faith that it's impossible for Johannes to have a different conscience. You're saying that, but still, Jonas also has revealed. Got revelation from the same God, saying the contradictory things. Well, you're seeing from the third perspective. My claim. I would like. I think I will. I'm making it clear that when I said that it's coherent for me to believe, I'm talking about my understanding. In my understanding, by the inclusion of this faith, I can coherently believe that the possibility that you're offering, that another God gave, I mean, the same God gave Johannes a different conscience, would be an illusion. So the moment I import faith, that would be out of the possibility. And with that framework, or with the dogmatic standard, I can coherently believe that that is out of possibility. What you're asking is, as a third person, seeing it from a third person, that I mean that it's possible, if that faith is not imported, then it's possible that Johannes could be having a different conscience given by the same God. Well, but I'm talking with respect to my faith. In my understanding, the moment I import faith, that makes it impossible, and that makes it possible for me to coherently believe in it. I'm not saying that I'm proving things. I'm saying that I'm coherently believing in things by virtue of importing faith. Whereas in atheism, you can't do that, because faith is not. Objectivity of dogmatic standards is, I mean, it can't be grounded to the premises of atheistic worldview. And you were saying, like, giving definitions like, it does. I mean, atheism could have dogmatic standards. Well, if you want to redefine atheism the way you're doing, well, still fine. But that would simply be an equivalent to a religion, because religion also, I mean, there are some religions which believe in personal gods. There are some religions that believe in non-personal gods, in which there are dogmatic standards but not personal god. Buddhism is an example of that, I guess. So basically, if you're saying that atheism can import dogmatic standards, but can import dogmatic standards but doesn't believe in god, I don't know what definition of god you have. Maybe you by god you mean only a personal god, but non-personal gods could also exist, like in case of uh, deism, or sometimes deism, maybe, or maybe in Buddhism. So if you want to define atheism to be something that can import dogmatic standards but doesn't import anything that Christianity or Islam or something else does it, well, your worldview is equivalent to a religion. So if that's what you're arguing, well, that's a possibility with that definition. But That's not what I'm arguing. When I say that atheism can't ground objectivity, I'm talking about a belief, a worldview in which no dogmatic standard exists. So, so I think if you agree that if a worldview in which no dogmatic standard exists, it's impossible to have objectivity, then I think we are in agreement with that, I guess. And another
Oh,
thing that you asked is, yeah, you want to say something? Or actually, I wanted to
no,
address.
I thought you were done. You can keep going if you still have more to say. It's okay. I thought you were done.
Oh, okay, okay. So I think you made another question, so I would like to address that, I guess. So regarding Cartesian, well, when you addressed Cartesian, I think you were using dogmatic standards. Now, if you define atheism to be something that includes dogmatic standards, then of course there won't be um, any much of disagreement, I guess. But you were using dogmatic standards in addressing Cartesian skepticism, because you were saying that you believe in things that 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 are seeming to you, which means that you believe in. I mean, when you said about uh, the word that is you said something like defeater. Yeah, defeater. So when you said about defeater, I'm talking about a particular case where the defeater doesn't have any access to change what you perceive. So in that case, defeater doesn't exist. So uh, lack of defeater in that particular case, is a scenario in which uh, you can't address. I mean, like uh, 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 Cartesian skepticism, unless you have a dogmatic standard, which I think you are importing. So by importing dogmatic standards, yes, you can address Cartesian skepticism, but that would be an equivalent to religion. So if that's your definition, then fine. I think there isn't much of a disagreement with that. What you're basically describing is another religion, but which is not Christianity, or which is not Islam, which is not a mainstream religion, but something that imports dogmatic standards. So that's if that's your definition, then I think there isn't much of a disagreement, I guess.
Yeah, I just think that you're sort of like you're accusing me of changing the definitions, but which is really weird because I find it's actually the opposite. You're changing the definition, like you're defining atheism as the reverse of dogma, and I think I'm not saying I am importing dogma because I prefer not to. However, I do think that there are atheists who are in fact dogmatic. I don't know why that would be something that you would hold to, where like Christianity is like just the only dogma. There's lots and lots of dogmas, both theistic and atheistic dogmas. There, I don't know why you would think that dogma is the opposite of atheism. It's just not the case, right? And it's not that you make it a god. It's just that you stop accepting evidence that contradicts that. That's what it means to be a dogma. So like. The view that I gave you would not be a dogmatic view, right? So, like, if you can offer me a defeater for my position, then you're able to overcome my seemings, right? So then I would have reason to believe something other than the seemings. So that can't be dogmatic. Like a dogma is going to be something where, even in the light of new evidence, you the evidence in favor of the belief. You would take it just on faith, regardless of any given evidence and any sort of substantiation of any other proposition. Right. So, like Christianity, if you define Christianity as just a dogma, and that's to say that it's going to reject any evidence that contradicts it, it's just going to say, oh, well, through that evidence, I'm going with Christianity. And that's how you have objectivity. This sounds like with more steps. Like you keep saying it's in your understanding that you're able to have objectivity, but that sounds like subjectivity to me. Like if I'm giving you the scenario where you and Johannes are disagreeing on something, God's telling him one thing, he's telling you another thing, and it's contradictory. It just sounds like you're saying, well, in my understanding, because I have faith in my understanding, then I can have this objectivity, but it's just for me. That's just subjectivity with more steps. Like, I don't know why you're taking more steps to it. Why don't you just say everything is subjective? It's just whatever the hell I want to. Because it sounds almost like it sounds closer to egoism than it does to like even a theistic position. Like I don't know how I don't know how you're separating your view from like a subjective view if it's just taking place within your understanding, and it's not the case that you're having like objectivity outside of your understanding, like something that's going to be mind independent, like in the classical sense of objectivity. Without that, I don't see how your view is in any way different than a subjectivist view. It just sounds like you're a subjectivist, both in the strong sense. So, like in the early part of the conversation, I criticized religious views. When it comes to particularly for a God, if everything's going to be dependent on the mind of God, then it's going to be in the classical sense. It's going to be subjective. And then now we get down to the end of it, and you're again a subjectivist in that you're saying, well, internal to my view, like it's just inside of my understanding that I can have objectivity. It's like, well, that sounds like if it's just inside of your understanding, then it's just subjectivity. Like that's what it means to be subjective. Like, like I don't see how this is any different than subjectivity. Now, my initial claim was that atheism is going to be more intellectually preferable, and part of the reason behind that is that I think that atheism, any sort of like skeptical challenge that applies to atheism, will apply to Christianity and any other position as well. Any sort of attack you can have on atheism, you can have on any. This is going to be symmetrical between the positions, and so, but atheism doesn't multiply entities beyond what's necessary to explain something. I think that you're trying very hard to explain objectivity, but you're jumping through a lot of mental gymnastics that I just don't think are necessary. I think we can just base things on our seemings, and then if somebody offers me a defeater for my seemings, then I have reason to doubt my seemings. And this doesn't require any sort of a deity. It doesn't require any kind of a it doesn't require anything else, anything outside of like the naturalistic of looking at the world to be able to do so. But you're requiring that there is this subject that's providing objectivity within just your specific, but just within your understanding, not within anyone else's understanding, but just within your specific understanding. And that just sounds like a lot of subjectivity down the line with just more steps to it. So a lot more gymnastics involved. So I don't see I don't see your view, but I think we should wrap it up here in just a minute because we're getting down to the hour and a half mark. So I'll let you have the last word. You can respond to what I say, or you can do closing remarks, whatever you'd like to do, and I'll end it there.
Okay, I will try to quickly finish it off. I would like to say two things. Firstly, when you give I mean when you speak about the I mean a defeater argument for like skepticism, I think that's basically contradicting. I don't know if I understood properly. Maybe in another video, sorry, in another event, maybe we can discuss a lot about it. But basically, when you say about defeater, you're bringing in objective reality, as if someone can show you something to be wrong, but that is exactly what you're presupposing to be the contradiction of simulation. So you can't have both those two things. So basically showing the defeat thing is basically contradicting its own premises. So we can discuss a lot more about it because there's some time. And in case of I think maybe, I guess I think time is up, the 1 minute is over. So but still I have a lot of things to do to say, but if you prefer, we can do voice chat some other day, I guess. I mean, it's like nice talking to you. I mean, nice discussing with you. So yeah.
Yeah, we can always set up another one. Johannes, I appreciate you taking the time to record things, and thanks guys for everyone showing up. If you guys want to stay after the recording and ask questions or something, feel free. We don't have to cut things off and just end things there. I was just trying to end the discussion so that we can have a reasonable amount of time to everything happening. So, but if anyone else has any input or any questions, open room to you guys.